Welcome to EPG Pathshala. My name is Dr. Madhura Nag-Chaudhary. I am a faculty at the School of Social Work, Tata Institute of Social Sciences. Today we are looking at the course on fieldwork and fieldwork supervision. The module that we are going to look at today is application of principles of social work to the field. So we will begin with the learning outcomes for this module. This module consists of the learning outcomes we hope for you to have is to understand the basic principles of social work. So we will go into what these basic principles are, to learn about the applications of the basic principles of social work for practice. So how are these basic principles applied in the context of social work practice, and to examine the dilemmas related to applications of social work principles in practice. So let me begin with a definition of social work. What is it that constitutes social work? It's important to understand before we go into the principles. So to give you a rudimentary definition, social work is an academic and practice-based professional field of study that seeks to facilitate the welfare of individuals, families, groups and communities with a focus on promoting social change, development, empowerment and/or cohesion. One of the most important things that or characteristics of social work as a profession is that it is a helping profession carried out through a variety of methods in the field, including casework, group work, community organization and social action. In the next slide, we are going to go into what these methods essentially entail, because when we think about principles, principles lie at the base of all kinds of practice and all kinds of methods. So going into each method, casework as a method essentially involves working with individuals and is focused on helping individuals to cope more effectively with problems in social functioning. This is a definition given by Perlman in 1957. It's an old definition, but it pretty much holds true even today, because essentially here we look at working with small groups of people or working with individuals, primarily with individuals, and individual focused problem solving. Then we look at group work. Group work, on the other hand, aims at enhancing the functioning of individuals, families and groups of people through a purposeful group experience. It consciously accepts a democratic premise of functioning among groups. Now, this basic definition is given by Gisela Konopka, but what it essentially talks about and what is important about this definition is that as social workers, we don't only work with individuals, we also work with groups. The groups may be families, the groups may be people who are somewhat homogeneous, people who have common problems. Essentially, the group process is what helps people in the problem solving process. Then we go into community organization and social action, which have as their focus very large groups, whole communities, which may be geographical or based in common interest across a wide area. So essentially these are at a more macro level, and they look at very large groups of people. However, when we look at these principles, they are in that sense universal. So now we're going to go into the principles of social work. There are some basic principles that all social workers are expected to follow while working in the field, and though these are more applicable to working in individual contexts, they do also apply while working with large numbers of people. These principles are essential to forming effective relationships with people. They were contributed by Reverend Dr. Felix Bijstek, a Jesuit priest and a professor at the Loyola University at Chicago, USA. He was a professor there from the mid-50s onwards, and what he has outlined are 7 basic principles to be kept in mind while working with people. Why these principles are important is because they facilitate relationship building with people, particularly those in need and in crisis or distress. So now we'll go into what these 7 basic principles are. The 7 basic principles of social work include the following: purposeful expression of feelings, controlled emotional involvement, acceptance, individualization, non-judgmental attitude, client or service user self-determination, and confidentiality. So now we will go into each of these principles in much greater detail. So when we talk of purposeful expression of feelings, why we have these visuals here is because they epitomize what this principle represents. Now, when people come to us in a great deal of distress or in a situation where they are feeling helpless and not knowing what to do, it is very important for them to be able to express what they are feeling, what their situation is, what are the things they think they need you to know. So one of the visuals is about a person expressing themselves. The other visual is what social workers as recipients of this discussion or of this information have to do in terms of listening carefully. Your body language representing that you're listening actively, you're listening carefully, you are with the person and you are interested in what they have to say. So when clients or service users, who are frequently those facing multiple deprivations, crisis and extreme distress, come to a social worker for help, it is very important to recognize that the individual or that group needs to express their feelings and thoughts and to allow the person or persons to do so without judgment or without asking too many questions. So it cannot be an interrogation, it has to be an opportunity to express freely. This principle focuses on the need for social workers to be active and empathetic listeners who will give their clients a patient hearing. So the person at the other end has to feel that you are listening to them carefully, you are listening to them patiently, you are interested in every word they have to say, and that you are very much connected to them and wish to help them. So the purposeful expression of feelings essentially is talking about this particular aspect of beginning the process with your client or service user or group that you're working with or the community that you're working with. We will move on to the next principle. Now, this is a very important principle. The visual you have in front of you has a person looking confused with a lot of emotions coming out: sadness, anger, confusion, tiredness, shock. When people come to us, many times they are in distress or crisis. So in order to work with persons in distress or crisis, some engagement with them and their problems is necessary to enable and facilitate problem solving. Now the thing is that though that person at that point in time when they come to us, they may be crying, they may be emotional, they may be angry, they may be very unhappy. So in that sense, and some of the stories that they have to tell are so heartbreaking and are so difficult that one may feel very emotional. As a social worker, we may also get very emotional. There may be situations where the social worker may connect with the client or service user's distress, having faced similar situations in their own life. It may lead to the social worker to get emotionally involved with the client or the service user's problems, and in extreme cases it may become difficult for the social worker to distinguish the client's or service user's hurt or anguish from their own past experiences, because we all come with past experiences, we all have our own baggage, and we have to deal with that alongside what we work with or the people we work with. So such situations may lead to a loss of objectivity on the part of the social worker, and that may hamper their ability to do problem solving with the client or the service user. Now what happens here is that when we lose our objectivity as social workers, when we become part of that person's problem or that group's problem and we feel that their problem is also our problem, then we are not able to look at it in a dispassionate manner and maybe problem solve as a little bit on the outside. Some level of objectivity has to be maintained for us to be able to engage productively with the person or the service user. So this principle in essence focuses on setting limits or boundaries. We have to have boundaries. We cannot become part of that problem or that situation. It cautions, so this principle cautions against too much involvement with the client or service user and his or her problems. Social workers need to limit their engagement with the problems to the professional sphere. If you start taking your client or service user's problems home with you, it will lead to all kinds of breakdown, and it will lead to a loss of functioning on the part of the social worker. So there has to be a boundary between the personal and the professional space of the social worker, and that is what this principle talks about. Moving on, the next principle is the one of acceptance. As you can see, the visual says keep an open mind. Acceptance essentially means embodying that, keeping an open mind, listening, and being able to accept a person in their entirety, because we are all unique individuals. We all are people who come with strengths. We are all people who come with flaws. So it is so when we work with a person, we have to accept them as they are, for who they are. So social workers work with people from diverse backgrounds, quite different from their own. So I may be a person coming from a situation where I've had a very secure childhood. I have always had parents and family about me. So I do not know what it means to be in a situation very different from that. So when people come to me from a very diverse background, from a very diverse situation, speaking a very different language, dressing very differently, having different kinds of habits and milieu, I need to be able to engage with them without trying to put them in a box. So it is extremely important for social workers to recognize and accept differences. An individual has many parts, and so we have to look at all of them. The social worker needs to accept the person in his or her entirety, including positives and limitations. Acceptance also does not mean agreement with or approval of the person in needs behavior or the service user's behavior or standards, but rather it means being respectful of the person in need and his or her dignity and self-worth, no matter what state the person is in. So a person may be an addict, a person may be a person with maybe a person who has been involved in a crime, maybe a person who may be a part of domestic violence and maybe the perpetrator. However, we have to understand that that person is first a person, and then and separate that person from those kinds of behaviors that they have engaged in. So it is necessary to separate the person in need from his or her actions. A person is not bad, but his or her actions may be. So if you have a perpetrator of violence, you have a person who is an addict, they may have behaved very badly, they may have hurt other people, they may have stolen, but those are just their actions. That is not who the person is. So acceptance means being able to separate these two. It forms the basis for implementation of most other principles and values of social work, such as respect for human dignity and worth, recognition of uniqueness and individuality of each person, participation, equality, and equal rights of all. Coming to the next principle, which is individualization. This principle refers to the social worker's recognition of each individual's uniqueness and them being different from all others and having their own qualities, including strengths and talents as well as difficulties. So when we say that, so each person is unique, we cannot, so if people have similar demographic profiles, so for example, they come from the same community, they are both poor, they are both men, they are both engaged in the same profession, does not mean that those two individuals are absolutely alike. They may appear alike, but they're still two different individuals. They may have their different personalities, they may come from different family situations, they may have different needs. So when we work with any person, we have to be very aware of the fact that each person is a unique individual, and we cannot sort of look at it, generalize, homogenize people. Social workers need to take time to learn and understand about the specific needs and situation of the person before and while taking on interventions. So when we plan interventions, we have to be aware of the unique situation of that person. Social workers, also it could be, this would be the same for communities, this would be the same for groups as well. I will talk a little bit more about how that happens. Social workers need to take time to learn about and understand the specific situation and needs of the client or person in need before and while taking on interventions. While taking on groups, Two, the social worker will have to take individual differences into account in the process of problem solving and intervention with the group and each individual within the group. So we were talking about how this principle would be applicable in the context of working with groups. When we have, for example, a group of people who are caregivers and they have a person who's terminally ill in their family, for example, somebody who's suffering from cancer, somebody who's suffering from some kind of terminal illness. Now, in a sense, all of these people have that in common. However, their family situations may be very different. The person who is suffering from that illness may be of a different age, maybe in a different, there may be different kinds of situations associated with that. So simply because all of these people are caregivers doesn't make them alike. We need to look at each person's need when we plan an intervention, so that we take into account all of the diversity within the group, even though technically they are homogeneous, in the sense that they are all caregivers and they all have a terminally ill family member within their home. A social worker cannot assume that persons belonging to the same youth group or with similar demographic characteristics are entirely homogeneous. Now, the next principle, I will start by this quote. You know my name, not my story. You've heard what I've done, not what I've been through. This is a very important quote to embody what we are going to look at now, which is a non-judgmental attitude. Sometimes we only look at the surface and we don't look beyond it. But as social workers, we have to look beyond the surface, and that is a very important part of who we are and the work we do. Social workers deal with a variety of clients, persons in need, many of whom are stigmatized or less understood by society. Often their behavior and actions of the clients may not be as per norms of society and may at times be such that are greatly disapproved of, and in some cases may be in conflict with the law. So you may have people who have a mental illness or who have a disability, so they behave differently as compared to what is the social norm. There may be other people who may have committed a crime, but and so in that sense are stigmatized or are considered persona non grata for whatever reason. But as social workers, we do need to understand that when we look at that person, we are not looking at a criminal, we are not looking at a convict, we are not looking at a person with disability who's to be pitied. We are looking at a person. We are looking at a person with a story to tell, a person who needs somebody to be able to reach out to them, somebody to be able to understand them, and somebody to be able to help them and work with them. And that is where our core strength lies, and we have to focus on that. This principle requires a social worker to refrain from passing any judgment on their client's behavior, particularly by way of apportioning blame or condemning the person or commenting on whether the person should or should not be punished for their actions or what their punishment should be. We are nobody to sit in judgment. That is the job of the law, that is the job of other people, it is not the job of a social worker. So when we work with a person, we also, our body language, the way we talk to a person must also embody this to ensure that the other person does not feel that we are, as social workers, we are passing judgment on them or that we are condemning their actions. Though of course it is not that we should support a person's bad behavior. There is no need for us to condone a person's bad behavior, but the fact that, again, going back to acceptance, we are able to separate the person from their behavior and therefore be able to see it in a neutral fashion or an objective manner. So this does not mean that we do not assess a person. A social worker has to make assessments. A social worker has to assess what it is that the person wants, what it is that the person or the group needs, and based on that take on interventions. So assessment is required, and so in that sense we do evaluate. However, evaluation and judgment are two different things. So while we evaluate a person's needs or assess the situation, we have to still maintain that we are not judging the person. Right? Now, non-judgmental attitude also implies that the social worker refrains from jumping to conclusions, but We make efforts to learn about a situation through multiple perspectives and give the client or person in need a fair chance to tell their side of the story. So if a person comes in handcuffs, we are not going to jump into a conclusion saying, oh my goodness, I have a criminal on my hands. But I have to say, okay, this person is in trouble, this person is in need, this person is in crisis, and obviously is in a great deal of distress. That is why this person has been brought to me or has come to me. So I need to first get an understanding of what the story is, what his or her story is, what do they have to say, and then arrive at whatever other conclusions I have to arrive at. It also means that no matter what, whether the client is guilty or not, the social worker must continue to approach the client or service user with the intention of being helpful. I cannot say that so and so has committed a crime or has murdered somebody and therefore I will not help him or is not deserving of help. And so therefore we do have to affirm that the individual is worthy of care and attention and help at the same time. So we are not condoning the fact that the person has committed a crime or gone against the law. Client-user self-determination. Now what do we mean by self-determination? Self-determination, first half of that part is the self. So it is about the individual himself or herself. Then determination. When we talk about determination, it means to decide, to take decisions. So self-determination is talking about an individual or individuals, families, groups taking decisions for themselves about what they wish to do, how they wish to be helped, what the problem really is, and what they wish to do about it. Social workers, very often what happens is, when we get trained as social workers, we see ourselves as experts. We know what to do with somebody who comes as a victim of a natural disaster, or a child in conflict with the law, or having addictions, or having, there are human rights issues. We see ourselves as experts. We are trained to deal with these issues. So we go into it thinking that, okay, I know what to do now. But when a client comes with a problem requesting help in a crisis situation, we react by moving into that role and saying, okay, now we'll give them advice, we'll design an intervention, we'll move into help and say, okay, now we have to resolve this situation as quickly as possible. But when we do that, we forget to ask that person or that group, what is it that you really need from us? What is it, how do you see this as a problem? What is it that you want the social worker to do? And so often we go in guns blazing to take action or to make interventions based on what we think the need is, or what we think that the client would want in that situation, without actually having that discussion with the persons, families, groups themselves. So that is a principle, that is a violation of this principle, because there we are treating the individual, we are somewhere disrespecting their capacity to be individuals, to problem solve on their own, to be independent, to overcome their difficulties, which inherently every human being has, no matter what situation they're in. So this principle is based on the idea that no matter how disempowered, distressed, vulnerable the client or service user may be, the social worker cannot assume that they know as experts what that person wants or needs. The role of the social worker is always to assist the client to make appropriate decisions for themselves based on what the social worker may think is in the best interest of the client or user. So what we as social workers have to do is to give the person information, to give them to connect them to resources, to tell them what are the possibilities are, to explore whatever possibilities they come up with, and arrive at an intervention based on that kind of a discussion. Here the essential and core value is participation, which is the basic principle where we seek the client's participation in the process of intervention, as well as taking decisions about his or her life, And this is seen as a non-negotiable, because clients and service users, we have to believe that they have capacities, that they are empowered, and when we want to empower somebody, we want them to explore the power within. The client self-determination allows for the person to do so. Arriving at our next principle, confidentiality. Now, it's a very interesting quote we have over here. What you say in here stays in here. So essentially, people come to social workers and there is a lot of very sensitive information that is shared. People share their life stories, people share and give information or tell social workers things that nobody else in the world knows. Now, so one of the basic principles here is what the person says or what the person tells you stays with you. However, if you see, there are little caveats here, exceptions. Someone is hurting you, you want to hurt someone, you want to hurt yourself. So though we believe that whatever sensitive information is shared with us should not be told to others in any case, they should remain with the social worker. However, there are situations when this may not be advisable. And so what this quote is telling us is essentially about what are the exceptions to this rule, right? Now let's go more into what confidentiality entails. Social workers have access to a lot of sensitive information about their clients or service users due to the nature of their work. So people come to us in some kind of a crisis, whether they have HIV or whether they have an addiction or whether they are going through some kind of, they want to give a child for adoption. All of these circumstances may be difficult for the person, may involve other people, may involve situations which can be quite, if they come out, quite disastrous to the well-being of that person, can put the person's life in danger. Multiple things can happen, social ostracism, all kinds of things. So because of that, and also it's an issue of trust. When people come to us, they trust us with things that are very private. So in that situation, we have to make sure that we are worthy of that trust and we keep that trust. So in most cases, having the sensitive information is crucial for us as social workers to be able to assist the person in need in an appropriate fashion. However, it is our duty to ensure that the information which is confidential and sensitive and which is shared, if it is shared, may harm the client or service users, be kept safe and not let out to others. Even when we are having discussions with other people, with other social workers, we have to ensure that we do not name a client, we do not tell their information, we do not tell their story, because you don't know how it may come back to harm that person. However, this principle is actually quite complicated, because sometimes people share information in confidence which can pertain to other people's lives and which can cause harm to another person. The person may also say that I am so distressed right now, I am thinking of taking my life. I might just maybe taking sleeping pills will work. What do you think? A person has that discussion with me. If I keep that information with myself, the chances are, if that person, God forbid, acts on that and commits suicide, there will be a loss of a life. So if that person is thinking of putting their own life in danger, or they're talking about killing somebody or harming somebody or hurting somebody, then that information can no longer be considered confidential. It has to be shared to prevent further harm from taking place. So those are some of the caveats or some of the limitations or some of the exceptions to this very important rule or principle. Okay, going further into this principle, confidential information may also be need to be shared if more than one social worker or team of social workers within the agency are working to help the person in need. So there are times when I, as an individual social worker, may not be able to do problem solving on my own. I may require the help of other experts. This is particularly true in particular kinds of situation. A person with disability, a person with coming with multiple problems. So while I may know about certain kinds of issues, I may have the knowledge and the resources to help the person on one count, I may not be able to help the person on other counts, and therefore I may need to share that information. In such a situation, the social worker may inform the client that their information may need to be shared with the team in order to provide appropriate intervention to assist the client. Here we do inform the client that only information necessary for intervention will be shared with other team members. A written consent may be required for sharing certain kind of information or sharing client information across agencies, because sometimes we have to work with other organizations. There may be multiple organizations helping one person or helping one family depending on how complex their problems are. Right? So therefore written consent may be taken, or some kind of formal consent process may be undertaken to ensure that there is only so much information that is given. The limits can be put by the client or service user here, right? But absolute confidentiality may be difficult. So coming to the end of this module, what we need to remember as social workers is being non-judgmental, being respectful, being genuine, making sure that we do not hurt the self-esteem of our clients, show empathy, be good listeners, communicate well. If we are able to do this, all of this together, we will be able to implement all these principles in tandem with each other and provide and be truly helpful to people and contribute. So do read the e-text, and for further reference you may refer to Professor Grace Matthews' book, An Introduction to Social Casework. There are other references that are also given in the reference list. Do go through the same. It will give you much greater clarity. Also, examples of situations are given with questions which will help you think through some of the ethical dilemmas which we haven't discussed in great detail over here. But I think reading through those situations and analyzing and thinking them through will help you understand each of these principles in much greater detail. Also, multiple choice questions are given which provide various scenarios where dilemmas may arise, or where you have to think through which principles would figure most prominently, or which principles you would have to really think about when working with people in that particular situation. Thank you very much.